Hi, I'm Simon Drew, and you're listening to the Practical Stoic Podcast. If you'd like to find more episodes of the show, as well as articles and information about my one-on-one alignment coaching, then you can head to my website. It's simonjedrew.com. If you do have the means to support the show, then I'd love to see you in my Patreon community. Just go to patreon.com/simonjedrew, where you'll also get access to over 240 episodes recorded before 2020. But for now, enjoy the show. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me here on the Practical Stoic Podcast. Now, I just want to start today by saying I'm so sorry that I've kind of taken it back to one episode per week on the podcast. The reason that I'm doing that is because at the moment I am finishing my degree in music. So basically for the next couple of months, it is going to be one episode a week so that I can, focus on this and also coaching and also meetups and also uni, staying fit and sane, make sure that there is a certain level of homeostasis maintained, and that means one episode a week for the next few weeks. But anyway, I hope you've been enjoying the episodes anyway, the wonderful guests that I've had on the show. And today is absolutely no different. We have a repeat guest who is a good friend and somebody who I absolutely love talking to because he really does embody what it means to live a philosophical life. And this person is Pete Bell. Now, you've all heard him on the show before, and today we're specifically talking about his new book that he has released, his very first book that he's ever written, that he wrote this year, called Stepping Out the Other Side. And I was really honored that Pete actually asked me to write the foreword to the book, and so I've had the chance to actually read the book, and it's really hard to kind of sufficiently convey the value, the worth of what Pete is bringing to the world in this book that he's written, because it's just such a raw and authentic look inside the mind of Pete while he was going through some of the most challenging times in his life dealing with mental health, and just such a beautiful message of hope for anyone who is going through problems with mental health or depression, thoughts of suicide. This kind of book is a story for those kinds of people who are wondering, how do I get through this? How do I actually move on with my life? And what you're reading in this book, Stepping Out the Other Side, is an account of somebody who was able to do that, who was able to step out the other side of those dark moments in his life. And so I'm so grateful that, Pete wrote this book. I'm so grateful that he, even offered to have me play a very small part in, writing the foreword, of course. And I'm really grateful to have him on the show today as well. And, before we jump straight into it, I do have a quick little message that I do want to read that Pete suggested would be helpful in this kind of discussion. So please note that the following discussion does make reference to mental illness and suicide. The discussion does not substitute medical advice or professional health support. Please seek help from a health professional immediately if you have any concerns regarding your own mental well-being. This message is so critical, especially given the ongoing challenges of COVID-19. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Asking for help is a sign of courage. And finally, I just wanted to let you know that if you do want to purchase Pete's book, you can find a link in the show notes where you can go to his website. He's currently publishing it, and so you can actually put in your email and get updates for when you can purchase it. And hey, if you're listening to this when it's out, then you can purchase it straight from there, hopefully. So without any further ado, I'd like to present this interview with Pete Bell. Okay, so Pete, mate, it's so good to be speaking with you again. I got a lot of really great feedback from people after I had you on the show last time. And obviously, because you're just such a genuine person, you're so authentic when it comes to speaking about your trials and tribulations that you've been through in your life. And you've had no shortage. And what we're doing today is obviously talking about the book that you just recently wrote, Out the Other Side. Stepping Out the Other Side. Man, I'm so proud of the effort that you put in, because it was a beautiful book. I'm honored that you got me to write the foreword for it. You're a beautiful person and you're telling a beautiful story. I mean, it's a story of, I know you don't like this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway. It is a story of heroism. It is because, it's a story of your life, going from the darkest moments of your life, dealing with, mental health issues or brain health issues, as you would put it, to stepping out the other side, as you call the book. And now you're here. Do you feel like you've stepped out the other side now? Do you feel like you're at that moment where you can kind of look back on all of this and say, it was not that it was worth it, but, it's there and I'm here now?
Yeah, I definitely. And firstly, thank you for your kind words, and also the magnificent forward in the book. I couldn't have thought of a better person to contribute in that regard. So, thank you very much once again. And great to be here and talking to yourself and your followers. It's actually a really awesome question. First up, that plays into the conversation around mental illness, and I suppose how I personally view what I call a battle. A lot of people often will say that they suffer through mental illness or mental health challenges. I guess I've made a framing decision to say that I'm going to take this on head on, and I'm not just going to sit back and let it control my life and run away from my story and those sort of things. I'm going to confront this in the mirror head first. I'm going to have a battle with it. So do I feel like I've stepped out the other side? Yeah, definitely in some regards. And, throughout the book, it really is a memoir through a period of time that starts with me in a hospital through to, I guess, where I am almost today in the current environment. And, like everyone in the world, having a look at the challenges associated with coronavirus, which we'll talk about in more detail. Um, I guess, and as it's covered in the book, it's taking responsibility now for my mental illness and integrating it into my life. It's almost irresponsible to say I've won the battle, because the battle actually never ends. There's a responsibility to maintain, a series of behaviours and activities and disciplines, and that must just simply never end. So I know I'm a bit of a complex character, and we like to have our philosophical conversations for obvious reasons. But I've got an untroubled mind at the moment, which says to me that, I have stepped out the other side. But the reality is that untroubled mind only exists because I'm putting in place all the right one percenters, I guess, and a disciplined approach to manage my mental illness. So, yeah, I feel like definitely in a really good place. But not under the fallacy of the mind that the next battle or trench or whatever it is always just around the corner if you don't manage appropriately what you need to.
Hmm. Yeah, and I want to jump into that a little bit, probably later on in the interview as well, because I want to talk about, you're extremely authentic in your approach. You're not going to hide anything from anyone because you know that you've been through it. You know that you've done the best by yourself, and you know that the best is yet to come. And so I want to talk about the darkest moments. I want to talk about the journey through it, and I want to talk about dealing with that constant looming, you might call it a fear or a threat, whatever it is, that it's going to come back again, or, that you're going to have a relapse. And I want to talk about all that stuff, but I guess I want to start by saying, why now for the book? I mean, obviously, we all had a little bit of extra time on our hands, maybe with the whole COVID situation coming along. But what was the real motivation for you to write this book now?
Yeah, it's another awesome question. The real motivation is to get the story onto paper to help others. I guess, you and I have spoken a number of times about my journey, and every time there's a similar theme, which is I never thought I would talk to anyone about my mental illness, and then I never thought I would do a podcast. I never thought I would tell anyone I went to hospital. I definitely never thought I would write a book, right? Or if I did, it wouldn't be until a later point of life, perhaps where I thought falsely that I had less to lose, right? When I would be prepared to be more vulnerable. The timing is right now because, when you boil it down to its core purpose, which is to help as many people as possible so that they have something they can look at in the future that might just give them, some guiding light. It's not covered in specific detail in the book, but the prologue of the book is really me in hospital going, I wish I could find a relatable story. You can find multiple stories of people who have battled through adversity, but usually they've got some form of a famous person, and sometimes I just personally find I can't relate to that story as such because I'm as normal as they come. So I kind of wrote this book thinking if someone is ever in that position as I was, I would like to think that they can find something that can just give them a glimmer of hope to hang in there and step out the other side. The other thing is suicide is prevalent in our society now, and I guess more and more I was just having conversations with people who said, I was just at a funeral the other day. A friend of ours, child took their own lives, or I can see famous people everywhere taking their own lives. And then when coronavirus hit, yeah, it was obviously, the classic quote of, I don't know if it was Churchill or someone that said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So I looked at it from that regard and said, yeah, well, they've obviously got some more time now to write the book. But I was also probably subconsciously or intuitively aware that if this drags on, that concept of people being in, challenging mental health space and suicide may actually increase. So I never actually definitively, I suppose, answered that question until now. That's why it's a great question. But definitely was prepared to put my own vulnerability or potential loss of ego or whatever you want to call it aside just to get this thing out there and help people. And never really thought about it, but I guess the timing just enabled me to find the courage and do that without, thinking how's it going to impact other people? That are they going to be upset with me, or what are they going to think about me if I write this down? It's raw. That's the universal feedback from a lot of people who have read it, and I like to say it's a brutal and beautiful story, and that's life. Yeah, you know better than anyone from all the great work you do. Things can't always be good. That's just the universal truth of the world. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's really what I love about this book is that, it is a story of hope, but you definitely don't shy away from telling the very nitty-gritty, horrifying moments of your life where, it could have gotten even worse, way worse, in a second. And you talk about those moments where, maybe even things couldn't have been worse for you. There's nothing to it other than it was just tragedy for you. And, I think that for a lot of us who would think about reading a book like this, obviously it is for the person who needs an example of somebody who's been through something like that, what they're going through. But also I think it's helpful for people like myself to read stories like this so that I'm not unaware of the mental struggles that so many people go through that I don't go through. And, when you read such an authentic account of dealing with a mental illness or a brain illness, it's like, man, it really puts things into perspective how grateful we should all be if we don't have to go through something like that, and how supportive you should be of people in your life who are going through something like that. So, you know, talk to me about, you even talk about moments in there where you're kind of even on suicide watch, going in and out of hospital, and what's it like, to the best of your abilities, to describe that? I know you do it in the book, but try and describe that for somebody who doesn't deal with a mental illness so that they can understand even just partially, what it's kind of like to be in that kind of state?
Yeah, the only way I can probably describe it from a logical perspective, because it's an illogical thought, right, is that the world or the people around you or the ones that you care about most will simply be better off if you're not here. That's one thing that I probably find like fairly easily to relate to people. The other component for me is I often wanted to kill my broken mind, but I guess I was always blessed enough to be able to say, but I don't want my physical uh, presence, being, soul, whatever it may be, to disappear as well. And at the end of the day, I think that was really what saved me. I still have a rational ability to say, um, you've got a broken mind. Just hang in there. Don't let it win. Don't give in to it. And for whatever reasons, blessed beyond words, that I didn't give in. But yeah, you're in the darkest place where you've just convinced yourself that despite what anyone else has said to you, what anyone else has done, you've convinced yourself that the world would be a better place if you're not here. And that brings all sorts of, as you can imagine, terrible feelings.
Yeah, of course. And, like I say, I think that it's something that, many people can probably relate to, even just on a tiny level of just saying, we all go through times in our life where things are pretty dark. We all have times where we have thoughts that, like you say, even though they're kind of not very rational, it's kind of like they come up there and you start going down all possible avenues. Is it almost as if the antidote to that kind of feeling of, the world and my family would be better off without me is one of the antidotes almost to live your life as if, you could be of service to the people around you, to the world, to actually contribute in a bigger way?
Massively. And very much all covered in the book. And a lot of conversations I have with people is the only surefire thing I know that helps pull me out of the black hole when I get there is to make it about a bigger cause than myself. So through the course of the book, when I talk about, I had to really just make, there's a classic quote in there, I think in the book, I think it's by Pythagoras, like the oldest and most powerful words are yes and no, right? And that's what it kind of came down to me. Do you choose life again after everything that's happened? Well, I made a decision. Yes, I did, and I chose life again. And then from there, it's kind of like, well, what do you want that life to be from here?
Yeah, man. And I'd love to ask as well. So if you were to do sort of like some sort of, whether it's 80-20 analysis, something like that, of all the things that have really helped you to I guess manage your mental illness, like what would you say are some of the most helpful things, whether it's people in your life, whether it's disciplines, whether it's learning to accept things, whatever it is, what are some of those for somebody out there who's really struggling right now? What do you have for them? And I guess it's in the book as well, but yeah.
Yeah, and there's the 5 main insights that are in the book, and it's the one we just briefly touched on there, which is number one, apply a broader lens, make it about something bigger than yourself. When I made that decision, yes, to continue to fight and live again, the decision was made on doing it, initially for my wife and my daughter, right? So that's that kind of make it bigger about yourself. There's examples in there where as soon as I got healthy enough to a point, I drove to the local Meals on Wheels because I just knew that I needed to start giving back to others, almost like a servant-based leadership mentality, for want of a better word. That's really important. My return to the same workplace where I was when I had the breakdown, I had to swallow all sorts of types of, inner conversations and ego and all those sort of things to do that. But it was the right decision. And not just for me and my family, it was the right decision for others, because, it's very hard to sit there and see someone that you care about, that you work with, be there 1 minute and next minute gone. And I didn't want anyone to feel any form of blame for that, because no one could have seen it coming. I didn't see it coming, so how could have anyone else, if that makes sense? So empathy is critical. Be able to see it from a bigger perspective outside of outside of yourself is a good first step. Now, you can't always be there when you're purely locked in the battle internally. One of the things I'm not sure I'll ever fully come to peace with about my mental illness is that when I'm in those darker spots, it's quite selfish, if that makes sense, because you can only be self-focused. You just have to get yourself through, and you don't have a lot of time for anything else. Now, as a person that prides themselves on giving to others and being empathetic, I find that very hard to reconcile. And maybe it is just because, I understand that there will be periods in my life when I have to go into that space that I look to overcompensate when I am healthy. But I know that as soon as you get that element of, right, I'm okay, I'm not going to do anything silly. To make it a bigger cause to something else is very important. Shadow integration is point 2, which I think we covered a fair bit in our last conversation. Own all of yourself. Be proud of the duality of all of us. We've all got good. We've all got potential to be bad. And don't run away from that, because so much unnecessary baggage goes with you, and you spend your whole life trying to reinforce a story that you think is right about yourself that may not necessarily be in your best interest. The third thing is sort of, beliefs can change. I think values stay fairly fixed, but your beliefs can change. And I learned, I guess, a lot of that from cognitive behavioural therapy, and that's why my interest in Stoicism ramped up, because there are some strong linkages in that regard. Start thinking new thoughts. I've never studied science. I don't know that much about neuroplasticity, but there's certainly enough evidence to say that if you want to rewire your beliefs, you certainly can. So things that helped me there, I guess, was, obviously I've got to be medicated now for a mental illness. Once upon a time, I took sort of the pig-headed approach of, I don't need tablets. I'll just manage, by having a better diet and exercising more and not drinking. And look, all those things are absolutely critical for mental health, and 100% of people have to manage their mental health. When you're talking about a mental illness, it's just a little bit deeper. So you can, do everything that all of us should do to have a great mental state and mental well-being, and mental illness can still catch you. So I've had to rewire my beliefs around taking tablets every day, what my legacy looks like now. So, my legacy is simply to stay on this earth and manage my mental illness as best as possible. That's the best legacy I can leave for my family. And if it's in the best interest of my family, it's in the best interest of me. The fourth one's the fallacy of control, which, is classic Stoic way of thinking. There was a lot of things outside of my control that I spent a lot of time worrying about.
Yeah.
And for no great benefit. And, this coronavirus time, as I was saying earlier, my phone's been ringing quite a bit lately, just with people saying, and these can be people of a variety of ages. Some of them are 70 years old, really hard, society's perception of hard men that have run their own business. And they're like, I don't know what to do at this moment. I've never experienced this. And the conversation I have is, as best as possible, create your version of certainty and create what you can control. You can't control what they're going to put on the news every night. You can't control the spread of coronavirus in Victoria. And it's an extremely sad set of circumstances down there at the moment. But your ability to wake up every day, whether it be for the first hour of the day, you lift some weights, or you go and do your walk outside, or there's also a famous quote from Francis of Assisi which goes along the lines of, first do what is a necessity, then do what you can, and before you know it, you'll actually be back doing the impossible. And I kind of look at that a lot with my breakdown/breakthrough, because a lot of people, whilst they're not at the point of a breakdown, they are looking for a breakthrough, whether they're at an existential crisis or whatever they're doing at this given moment. It's just not quite working for them. It's like, well, what do you want to do? What can you control? And start doing it. But do it with a renewed belief that that is actually your purpose. So, through this coronavirus period, your purpose might be very different to what it was previously when this virus wasn't here. But you've got to adapt to that new purpose, and you've got to commit to it, and you've got to do it. Even if you just say hour by hour, I do these commitments, and then put them day after day after day, and before you know it, you will be back, because your self-confidence will be back, you'll be feeling better. You boil it down to basics. That's how I went from a bed in hospital to releasing a book in, I don't know, not even a year and a half. Because once I made that decision to commit to life, it was almost intuitively, I knew I just had to start doing 1%ers again. You can't run before you can, you've got to walk before you can run, and you've got to crawl before you can walk. It's kind of that thinking, right? Just go and do what you've got to do what's a necessity to get through, embrace it as a purpose, commit to it, don't think about it, just do it. So that was a big one. And then the fifth one's gratitude. That's I can't speak highly enough of gratitude. Once again, I'm no scientist, but I'm sure there's enough scientific evidence to suggest that the power of the brain, and if you think about all the great things you've got, it can only have great impacts for you. And, once again, getting back to that purpose thing in this environment, don't think of it like what you can't do now, right? Think about what you can still do, whether you're out an hour's walk a day, make that your highlight of the day, and show it the love and gratitude that it deserves, because not everyone gets that opportunity still.
Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell.
Man, there's so much good stuff in there. Hey, and that's not only good stuff for anyone who's going through mental illness. It's good stuff for everybody. There's a couple of things that I want to touch on there as well. I think, firstly, just to mention that it's so surprising to me. It's actually surprising to me that this idea of the dichotomy of control has had such a massive resurgence in latter years. Because, I mean, it's like the most simple solution to so many problems. It's the simplest possible thing you could think of. Oh, control what you can, forget about the rest. And it's like, oh, gosh, okay, well, why did nobody tell me that? Or why did I not already just assume that? It's really quite amazing. But something that you mentioned earlier, talking about being the kind of person who's always looking after other people and kind of in the process neglecting yourself, and needing to relearn how to really take care of yourself. Do I think that there's all kinds of different pressures that are placed on different people. I mean, for example, you as say the breadwinner of the family, I mean, like, it must have been really hard, really difficult to stop and actually say, okay, I know I'm supposed to be taking care of my family. I know I'm supposed to be, work and all these other pressures and everything, but I actually need to take care of myself. Do you think that there's that extra pressure there? And if so, how did you deal with that extra pressure to always be taking care of other people?
Yeah, once again, awesome question. Probably just have to unpack that a little bit. I kind of didn't have a choice. I mean, everyone's got a choice. It comes back to that yes or no, and that's at a very, very deep level question. But when I came, when you have a breakdown, in some ways it's almost easier to fight back, if that makes sense, because there's very little expectation of others and very little expectation of yourself. Okay. in a lot of ways, it's all upside. Probably much harder when you don't have the breakdown and you try and transition from, someone who's got all these expectations on themselves or society's expectations or whatever they are, to transition to a more balanced life or whatever it looks like, or to change their career, etc. So, and I may be underplaying what I've been through a little bit. I found it that personally almost intuitive. As I said, I kind of once I swallowed the really bitter pill of my identity being taken away from me, because my career was my identity. That was the one thing I could hand on heart say I was good at. I've never been someone that has a massive amount of self-confidence. I'm on the downside of that. But I would certainly say that's what made me the person that I was. Now, when that was ripped away, that was pretty brutal to then sort of go, wow, everything I thought I was, I no longer am. And then you sort of start to rewire a few of those beliefs and say, well, you're actually, a parent and a husband and a person, and there's all these other great reasons why your existence on this earth is still required. You can go and get another job at some point, provided you're mentally well again and all those sort of things. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think there is another interesting point around is, you ask a lot of people, when you first meet someone, so what do you do? Is often the first question, as opposed to, so, where did you grow up, or what's your cultural background, or all these more probably important questions to understand why someone is the way they are, as opposed to what they just do for a living. But it all was all in the mix. It all played into. I was blessed. My wife could work full time. The place where she worked were very supportive. I was blessed at the place I worked when I broke down, welcomed me back 2 days a week in a lesser stress role. Now, if those things didn't happen, I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I wouldn't be in the position I'm in. So I'm extremely grateful for that. Others, it is a big consideration. Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, talk to me more about the influence of people, because I know that you talk in the book about how grateful you were for your wife, and I know how much you love her. Just grateful for the support that she offered. Firstly, just how important is it to have a support network around you of good people, and also for people who are acting as that support network for somebody with mental health, what can they do? What can they do to better support them in their journey?
Yeah. In terms of others who are supporting, this might sound a little bit of a complex answer, but sometimes there isn't actually that much you can do except just be there. When the battle gets real deep and real dark, and it's a one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat with yourself, a day-by-day, minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour proposition, you kind of just need to know that others aren't going to abandon you because of your mental illness or what you're going through. Now, what they say to you, like, they can say, you're great, hang in there, you've got so much to live for, all those things. It may not necessarily help that much. I've always found, for me personally, the greatest help is simply for people to say, I just need you to know I'm here. I'm not going to pressure you. I'm not going to have expectations of you. I'm here if you need me, but I'm just going to give you space and time to work through it. And when you come out the other side, I will be here for you. Now, that is just the most amazing, support you can have. The hardest thing is definitely silence, because that plays into your headspace again. It's kind of like, they must think I'm weak, or they must think I'm a failure, or they must whatever. It's all in your own head. Very rarely are the other people on the other side silent because they want to convey that message to you. They're silent because they simply don't know what to say. And once again, unless you've been through it yourself, or you're fairly well versed at, taking people through this journey, you won't know. You won't know what to say. Which is why my guidance is always just say that you care, that you're here. I'll be here when things get better. Just want you to know that. That's probably the second one. So what was the first part again, mate? Sort of more about my wife and
Yeah, I think just talking about the importance of having that support network around you.
Yeah. Absolutely critical. And in the book, I was blessed that Professor Patrick McGorry read my book. He was Australian of the Year in 2010, psychiatrist, and he writes some really pertinent points in the praise section for the book. And I couldn't be more positive enough about the medical support I received, or the support network that's around me. A lot of times they become my eyes and ears for things that I potentially am not seeing when I get unwell, or I drift back into old patterns. Another lesson I learned the hard way was I would always be reactive or band-aid. So, oh, hang on, I can sort of start to feel that I'm getting a bit down. I better go and see my psychologist. But then you become a master bullshitter as well. So you start to be able to bullshit yourself. You can bullshit someone else and say the right thing. So you kind of need a consistent support network around you that's going to call you on your own shit when it comes. Now, I don't mean that you're on shit in a negative way, that you're deliberately doing it, but when you're unwell, there can be things going on you're simply not aware of, but other professionals, trained people will pick up. I think also the acceptance that, my wife is my wife, and that's the relationship we have. She's not a trained medical professional. So that's something else I had to take a lot of responsibility around, that, I need to go to the right people to do the right job. And I don't want to be any more of a burden's not the right word, but, my wife has got her own life to live, and we've got a life to live together and a family. She doesn't want to be my roving psychologist, and nor do I want her to be that either. It's not fair on her. So I think taking responsibility and getting the right support network around you is it's critical. There's so many 1%ers that you kind of need to tick off to give yourself the best chance, and then you still may fall, right? But when you fall, I like to think that your resilience is higher because of what the fall you've been through previously. So your recovery should shorten, or you should avoid it. My ultimate goal now is to avoid another breakdown. I've got to live a balanced life and do everything I can. Now, if it still turns up, I can't control it. And I'm not going to beat myself up over that, but I'm going to make sure that I give it more than a fighter's chance to make sure that we get through it as best as possible.
Yeah, man. So I appreciate you sharing all of this. This is there's so much good advice in there for people who are, both supporting and who are actually going through this sort of stuff. And the book is just beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful because it's just so raw and such a perfect representation of exactly what you went through, and it really puts you in that, it gives you a really good picture of what it's kind of like to go through that. Not that we can get even close to understanding what it's like to go through that, but Pete, thank you so much for writing it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
How can people get it? I'm going to put all the links in the show notes and everything like that, but where would you like people to go?
Yeah, my website, www.aurelius.com.au/stepping, and you can register your details there. The book's finished now. It's about to start its first print run, so I guess you're pre-registering, and then I'll let you know when it's finished. And then you can make a purchase. It's also just two little things I'd also like to say is my wife does contribute in the book, and it's a really beautiful part of the story which gives a partner's perspective. And I also didn't want to write, I wanted it to be a positive book, if that makes sense, and a book that can help people. And that's something Pat McGorry says as well. Like, it's it's brutal, but it's also uplifting in the end. So if you start the book and think, hey, wow, this is like landed like a punch in the face, it does get better. I promise you that. So persevere. But by my wife contributing, it just gives a different perspective, and I can't tip my hat enough or pay enough respect and homage to people who support others who go through mental illnesses, because it's hard enough to understand when it's happening in your own head, and that's why I'm always very empathetic to others who don't always get the support side right, because how can they? It's very difficult. Someone's got a broken leg. It's from a medical perspective, there's a fairly solid set of rules of how you fix a broken leg. Someone has what's called a broken brain for all intents and purposes of mental illness. There's a lot of trial and error, and you can't see it. And people typically are most afraid or fear or don't understand what they can't see. That makes perfect sense. So there is a lot of focus in the book about the support side of things, and also an acknowledgement that we all have challenges. It's a universal concept of being human. So if you rewound my life back and said, do you choose to have a mental illness or not? I'd choose it. I absolutely would, because it makes me who I am. And the stories, if in 10 years' time, and I guess if I was to say I have a dream and a goal, it would be that I wouldn't need to write a story like this, because it's so prevalent in society, and it's becoming so much more prevalent with the way the world is going with technology and a few bits and pieces, that hopefully we don't have to share these sorts of stories, because it's just more accepted. It's accepted, like people have diabetes, they have to do what they have to do. People have a mental illness, they have to do what they have to do. And I've been blessed by being vulnerable and hearing a lot of stories from the other side, from people who aren't at that point of their journey yet, and they may never get there. And that's perfectly fine, but that's how I know that my story's not that rare, and I don't think it's that special, but I think it's important. It's important at this period of time, because we are at a bit of a crossroads, and I think every little bit we can do to, improve the narrative around mental illness, mental health, suicide, help people, it just has to happen. It's been a silent killer for too long, so that's just what I'd like to say in conclusion.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and it's such a perfect message. Hopefully we don't have to share those stories too often in the future, because it is just, there's so much stigma around it. But hopefully through conversations like these, more people wake up to that fact, and man, I can't recommend your book highly enough. You're a beautiful person. It's a beautiful book. And thank you so much for bringing it out to the world.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for your support, mate. I could not have been in this position without you and the great work that you do. And so thank you once again.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. If you'd like to sign up for email updates, join my Patreon meetup groups that we hold weekly, or if you'd like to offer feedback or suggestions for future guests or topics on the show, then you can head to simonjedrew.com. There you'll also find information about how we can work one-on-one together with my alignment coaching, based around the philosophical principles found in Stoicism. Finally, if you are on Facebook, then I'd love to see you in our group, the Practical Stoic Mastermind. But hey, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you next time.